might be more dangerous to the global financial system than every missile fired in this war combined. We are witnessing a shift that almost nobody noticed at first because it didn't involve a dramatic explosion or a Pentagon briefing, but it involves the one thing that actually powers the world, the currency of energy. Imagine a world where the United States can no longer fund its 800 military bases because the fundamental rule of the global economy was rewritten overnight at a 20-mile wide choke point. This is not just a story about a regional conflict. It is the story of how the 52-year reign of the petrodollar might be coming to an end, not with a bang, but with a simple demand to change the currency on a digital ledger, the value. Tonight's story isn't about a missile or a battlefield, it's about money. Specifically, the currency that powers the global oil market. If Iran allows oil tankers through the Strait of Hormuz only when they're paid in Chinese yuan, that would challenge the decades-old dominance of the US dollar in energy trade. When nearly 1/5 of the world's oil passes through that narrow waterway, the currency used to buy that oil suddenly becomes a global power story, not just an economic one. Something changed in this war, and almost nobody noticed it at first. The shift came from a single sentence quietly spoken by a senior Iranian official during a CNN interview. The official said, Iran is considering allowing oil tankers to pass through the Strait of Hormuz, but only on one condition. The oil must be paid for in Chinese yuan instead of US dollars. Read that again, slowly, because the full meaning of that sentence doesn't hit immediately. The Strait of Hormuz carries nearly 20% of the world's daily oil supply. It is the most critical energy choke point on the planet. For the last 14 days of this conflict, the United States military has been trying and failing to reopen it. Tanker captains were even urged by Donald Trump to show courage and sail through, yet the passage stayed effectively closed. Now suddenly, Iran is offering to open it again. But the price is not a ceasefire. The price is not a political concession. The price is something far more unusual, a currency change. If you understand what that means, the stakes of this war suddenly look very different. For more than half a century, the global oil market has run on one rule. Oil is priced in US dollars. That rule began in 1974, when Saudi Arabia struck a historic deal with Washington. Saudi oil would be sold exclusively in dollars, and in exchange, the United States would guarantee military protection. Other oil-producing nations quickly followed, and just like that, the petrodollar system was born. It sounds technical, but it changed how the entire global economy works. Any country that wanted to buy oil first needed dollars, which meant every country on Earth needed to hold dollar reserves. This created constant global demand for the US dollar. That demand allowed America to borrow cheaply. It allowed massive deficits without currency collapse. It allowed sanctions that could cripple entire economies. The petrodollar was not just an economic arrangement, it was the financial engine of American global power. It's the reason the US military budget can exceed the next 10 countries combined, and the reason Washington can influence global trade systems. That system has existed for 52 years, and now Iran is suggesting something that could weaken it. But here is where the story becomes more interesting. Iran doesn't need to defeat the United States militarily to do this. It doesn't need regime change or surrender. It only needs to prove one thing, that oil can move through the world's most important choke point without using dollars. Once that precedent exists, the entire argument for dollar-only oil becomes weaker. And something surprising has already been happening quietly in the background. Since February 28th, the first day of Operation Epic Fury, Iran has shipped more than 11 million barrels of crude oil through the Strait of Hormuz. Every single barrel went to China, and every transaction was paid in yuan. Chinese tankers moved freely through the waterway. They were not attacked. They were not blocked. Their shipments kept moving while other tankers waited outside the strait. Insurance costs climbed, and cargo sat idle. In other words, two different systems were already operating at the same time. yuan tankers moving, dollar tankers stuck. This quiet division has been happening for 2 weeks, which means the recent announcement was not really a new threat. It was Iran formalizing what was already happening and asking the world whether it wants to make that system permanent. A single sentence quietly spoken by a senior Iranian official during a recent interview might be more dangerous to the global financial system than every missile fired in this war combined.